A man's voice cracks through the phone line, a raw blend of panic and despair. Police department, hello? Yes, he stammers. On the other end of that 911 call is 37-year-old James Allen, reporting that he has just found his wife's body in the basement of their Michigan home. For 18 minutes, he follows the dispatcher's instructions, his sobs punctuating the sterile protocol of emergency CPR guidance. But when the first police officer arrives at that quiet suburban house in Tecumseh, something feels immediately off. The desperation from the call isn't matched by the scene. The house is eerily silent. And when paramedics manage to detect a faint, flickering pulse, when they reveal his wife is still technically clinging to life, the husband's reaction isn't the desperate hope you'd expect. It's a flash of frustration. A flicker of something colder. This is the story of a perfect performance that began to unravel the moment the curtain was pulled back, a story of control, a secret digital life, and a low basement ceiling that held the key to everything. Let's rewind to the beginning of that fateful day, September 14, 2018. By all family accounts, it started normally. James, his wife Amy, and their teenage daughter Ashley were having a typical Friday. Amy, a dedicated stay-at-home mom, handled the household, their daughter's activities, and their 5 cats. James described a morning of making breakfast together, of Ashley listening to music as she packed her lunch. He left for his well-paying job, a point of pride he often mentioned. Later, he came home early and took a nap. The normalcy continued into the afternoon. Amy picked up Ashley and her friend from school, came home, and made dinner for everyone. The plan for the evening was simple: drop the girls off at the Tecumseh High School football game, and then, James and Amy would have some rare alone time downtown. Around 6:30 p.m., the family car pulled up to the high school. Ashley and her friend hopped out, excited for the game. James and Amy then drove the short distance into downtown Tecumseh. Their first stop was a bar called Embers Bar and Grill. The mood, according to James, was still light. They then decided to walk to another nearby spot. JR's hometown grill and pub. Security footage would later confirm their presence there, showing the couple sitting together. It was at JR's, over drinks, that James brought up an idea that would change everything. The family had moved to Michigan from Florida just a year prior. James suggested that perhaps they should sell their new home and move back down south. Amy's reaction, according to James, was unexpectedly negative. She became dismissive. He described her pulling out her phone and texting, disengaging from the conversation. She said a couple times, "Oh, that's not going to work," James later told police. "She's normally positive and was sort of down and negative, and she's like, you know, I hope that works out for you." That last phrase struck a nerve. And I'm like, what do you mean, me? I'm talking about our life. That comment, "I hope that works out for you," ignited a tense argument. The mood shattered. When they decided to leave the bar, Amy was so upset she refused to get in the car with James. She told him she would walk home. Security footage from a business along the route captures this moment clearly. Amy Allen, walking alone down the street, her posture determined, heading in the direction of her neighborhood. James drove home separately. He would later estimate she arrived home around 7:58 p.m. James claimed that when he got home, he found Amy in the basement. She was holding an extension cord. An argument picked up right where it left off. Amy was angry, he said, about him supposedly slamming a door in her face as they left the bar earlier. James insisted it was an accident, that he simply forgot to hold it, but Amy didn't believe him. Insults were thrown. After about 10 minutes of heated back and forth, James said he decided to disengage. He went upstairs to the living room to cool off, leaving Amy alone in the basement. He told police he put on the Jim Carrey comedy Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, and tried to relax. Time passed. Around 8:40 p.m., James realized it was almost time to leave and pick up their daughter, Ashley, from the football game. He decided to go back downstairs to check on Amy, hoping to smooth things over before they had to put on a united front for their child. What he said he saw next formed the basis of his 911 call. "I went back down to check on her," he recounted. "And I glanced down there. I saw there was what looked like an upturned kitty litter pail." Huh. His voice would trail off in interviews, mimicking his own confusion in the moment. "And then I saw her." He claimed he found Amy with an extension cord around her neck, suspended from a low basement beam. He said he rushed to her, felt for a pulse, found none, and began frantic CPR before calling 911. Officer Ben Horn was the first to respond to that call. His initial observation was the silence. The desperate man from the phone call wasn't screaming for help as he approached the house. But as soon as Officer Horn announced himself, the performance began anew. James's cries echoed from the basement. Downstairs, Officer Horn found James sobbing over Amy's body, still intermittently pushing on her chest. The officer immediately noticed something odd. Amy had only the faintest mark on her neck. In cases of hanging or strangulation, officers are trained to look for specific, more pronounced injuries. This was barely visible. More officers and EMTs flooded into the cramped, low-ceilinged basement. As the professionals took over life-saving efforts, James Allen's behavior became a case study in erratic grief. He dramatically ripped his own shirt off, as if overwhelmed by heat and emotion, and collapsed onto the concrete floor. Then, just as suddenly, he would compose himself completely, calmly watching the paramedics work. This cycle repeated several times. An officer, sensing the chaos, suggested James come upstairs for a moment. James agreed calmly and walked up the stairs with steady steps. But the moment he entered the kitchen, out of the officer's direct line of sight, he unleashed a sudden, violent burst of energy, slamming his hand into a bowl of potato chips and sending it flying across the room. The abrupt shift from calculated calm to isolated fury raised immediate red flags. When questioned, James stuck firmly to his story of a marital argument gone tragically wrong. He painted a picture of their life as idyllic. "We live a healthy lifestyle," he insisted. "We work out. We go rock climbing 3 times a week. We cook meals at home. We grow our own vegetables." He spoke of his great job, of Amy's role as a caring mother and homemaker. He was adamant, Amy had no history of depression, no mental health struggles, no financial troubles. Nothing. Ever, he stated. When asked if she had ever tried anything like this before, his answer was definitive: never. Had any. Ever. But detectives knew that the story from a spouse at the scene is only the first layer. They began talking to Amy's family, and an entirely different narrative emerged, one of control, isolation, and fear. Amy's family described James not as a doting husband, but as a financially and emotionally controlling partner. They claimed he monitored Amy's every move, tracking her location through her phone. He dictated her social interactions and had systematically severed her from her own family. This included her son from a previous relationship, Caleb. Amy had Caleb when she was very young, and her parents had helped raise him. When Caleb turned 17, after repeated conflicts with James, he left to live with his grandparents. The family alleged that James's response was to forbid Amy from having any further contact with Caleb or the rest of her family. One of the last times Caleb saw his mother was at his high school graduation a year before her death. The family also shared a critical timeline fact: James did not call them to inform them of Amy's accident until over 14 hours after the 911 call. To them, this wasn't grief, it was a delay tactic. The investigation now had 2 conflicting portraits: the perfect family man and the controlling isolator. The digital evidence would become the tiebreaker. Detectives examined Amy's phone and computer. First, they found evidence supporting her family's claims of control. Text messages from James to Amy showed him using a tracking app. "Why are you at this location?" he would text, citing her exact coordinates. The messages had a demanding, surveillance tone. But buried beneath this layer of digital control was a shocking secret. Amy had been living a double life online. For 3 years, she had been involved in an emotional and physical affair with a man named George, who lived on the East Coast. Their communication was extensive, thousands of texts and frequent video calls. The messages were deeply intimate, explicitly sexual, and filled with detailed plans for a future together. They had met in person twice, once for coffee, and once for a private hotel rendezvous. Most crucially, detectives could trace the affair right up to the moment of her death. Time-stamped records showed that during the argument at JR's bar, while James was talking about moving south, Amy was secretly texting George. She was telling another man she loved him while her husband planned a future she didn't want. The last messages were heartbreakingly hopeful. George texted, "I wish we could be together right now." Amy replied, "I'm excited to see you again." George wrote, "Good. Let's do it." Amy's final message, end of October. She was making plans for a meeting just weeks away. This discovery presented a powerful motive. Had James discovered the affair, Amy never regained consciousness. 3 days after the incident, on September 17, 2018, she was taken off life support and pronounced dead. The medical examiner's report confirmed the cause of death, ligature strangulation. However, the manner of death, the crucial determination of homicide, suicide, or accident, was listed as undetermined. The physical evidence alone wasn't conclusive. The case began to stall. It was revived when Michigan State Police Detective Larry Rothman took over. He focused not on the emotions or the testimonies, but on the cold, hard physics of James Allen's story. James claimed Amy had used a common, orange, 3-pronged extension cord. Detective Rothman looked at the crime scene photos. The basement ceiling was notoriously low, about 7 feet from floor to joist. Amy was 5'6". Could she have done this to herself in that space? He contacted a forensic engineering lab and asked them to recreate the scenario exactly. They used a mannequin of Amy's exact height and weight, an identical extension cord, and replicated the basement conditions. The results were definitive. The forensic engineers concluded that, given the cord length, the anchor point, and Amy's height, her feet would have made contact with the basement floor. She could not have sustained a fatal suspension in that configuration. A renowned forensic pathologist reviewed the engineering report and the autopsy findings together. Based on the scientific impossibility of the suicide scenario, she officially changed the manner of death from undetermined to homicide. This scientific breakthrough led to an arrest. By the time charges were filed in October 2020, James Allen had long since left Michigan. He had packed up Ashley and their 5 cats and moved back to his hometown in Ocala, Florida. He had a new fiancée, and their wedding was scheduled just 5 days after the arrest warrant was issued. He was taken into custody in Florida, his wedding plans abruptly canceled, and extradited to Michigan to face 1 count of open murder. His trial began in September 2021. The prosecution, led by prosecutor Angie Borders, argued that James was a controlling husband who exploded in a rage upon discovering his wife's affair, strangled her with his hands or the cord, and then staged a clumsy suicide attempt. They played the bodycam footage for the jury, highlighting his theatrical, on-again off-again grief. He would be sobbing, then instantly compose himself to answer questions, a witness noted. They called Amy's son, Caleb, to the stand. He testified that James had a violent streak, describing an incident where James had choked him from behind until he gasped for air. It felt like forever, Caleb testified, drawing a direct line to the method of his mother's death. The defense, led by attorney Daniel Guerin, attacked the case as speculative. Where was the direct evidence? There were no defensive wounds on James's arms or face. No skin or DNA under Amy's fingernails. They argued that Amy, profoundly isolated, secretly drowning in guilt over her 3-year affair, and with a blood alcohol level of 0.09% that night, had taken her own life in a way that created confusing physical evidence. They presented their own medical expert, Dr. Francisco Diaz, who testified that the lack of certain traumatic injuries in her neck suggested she was not manually strangled by another person. After 6 hours of deliberation, the jury returned. They found James Allen guilty not of first-degree murder, but of the lesser charge of second-degree murder. The verdict suggested they believed he killed her intentionally, but not with premeditation. Perhaps in a sudden, explosive fit of rage. In October 2021, the judge sentenced him to 20 to 45 years in the Michigan Department of Corrections. He will be eligible for parole in the year 2040. The story of Amy Allen is a tragic blueprint of hidden lives. The truth wasn't in the loud sobs or the torn shirt. It was in the silent, scientific failure of an extension cord in a low basement. It was in the digital trail of texts, both controlling and clandestine. It was a reminder that the most convincing performances often happen off-stage, in the quiet moments when we think no one is watching. And sometimes, it's the quietest evidence that speaks the loudest. If this deep dive into a story where truth was stranger than fiction captivated you, please support our mission to uncover more. Hit the like button, and make sure to subscribe to Winds of Thought for more documentaries that piece together the puzzles hidden in plain sight.